Let's turn this simple slip knot into a semi-fixed loop. Hello fellow knot tires. Welcome to Knots with Neka. By adding another knot or a loop or a twist into one knot can turn it into another knot. So we'll start off by creating the simple slip knot by creating our loop, dropping our working end behind the loop, pinching and cinching down. Now if we were to pull on this loop, this tail end would come all the way through, leaving us with just the overhand knot. But we can fix that by creating an overhand stopper knot in the end, by creating a loop and pulling our working end through the loop and tightening down. Now, when we pull on the loop, that stopper knot, we'll stop the end from pulling through, creating a semi-fixed loop, since one end of the loop can still be pulled and changed. And it's also still a slip knot. You're just left with the stopper knot. And you could turn this into a slip knot as well if you wanted to. You can also create this loop by starting with the stopper knot and then creating the slip knot and cinching the knots together. Now this little loop is pretty good if you just need to kind of hook the rope over something just to give you a little bit of security, as well as to hang things up. You can also tie this around or through an object. To tie this loop around an object, you want to start off by creating the overhand knot, feeding the working end around or through your object, then feeding the working end back through that overhand knot, creating our slip knot, and then creating the stopper knot. Of course, you can tie the stopper knot first and then feed it through the overhand knot. The only downer with it being tied this way is you do have to untie the stopper knot first and then untie the entire knot. It doesn't work like a slip knot in this fashion around an object. But it's definitely not meant for anything too heavy, because if pulled very hard and tight, you can either jam the knots or the stopper knot could work its way through the first overhand and coming undone. But we can fix that by creating an Englishman's knot, which is almost the same process with one little change in the end. So we'll start off by creating our simple slip knot. And instead of tying an overhand stopper knot in the end, we're going to tie an overhand knot around our running end. The best way to do this to get a semi-symmetrical knot when they meet up is to follow the same pattern as this first knot. So if you follow the first knot from the rope that comes down into the knot, it comes down, comes around, all the way around, and down and through. So we're going to do that same pattern with our working end. We're going to come down, we're going to come all the way around, creating our loop, taking our tail end, and coming down. So then when you pull on the loop and those knots come to meet, they lay nicely together. Two overhand knots meeting up in this fashion is called the Englishman's knot. When it creates a loop, that is the Englishman's loop. The Englishman's loop is still a semi-fixed loop because you can pull the bottom knot and it will become smaller, and if you pull on the loop itself, it will become bigger. And of course you can tie the Englishman's loop around an object. It just takes a little bit more work. So have to start off by creating your overhand knot, coming around or through your object, feeding your working end through the overhand, and then tying another overhand around the running end. And again, you do have to untie most of this knot for it to come undone. You can also tie this by creating a false alpine. We'll learn about the real alpine later down the road. But to create a false alpine, you'll take a portion of the rope in your hands, and you want a little bit of rope between your two hands so you can push your two hands together, creating a bite. And you're going to twist the ropes so that they come into the middle of the bite. And you have your bite and two loops. You're going to cross those two loops together, creating a third loop. You're going to grab the bottom of the bite between your working and your running ends, and you're going to bring it up and through that third little loop. And you're going to grab that portion of the bite, your working and your running ends, and you're going to gently pull down just so everything kind of comes together. And you have one loop on top and one loop on the bottom. You're going to take that top loop and you're going to push the whole knot through that top loop till it comes to the bottom. Then you're going to grab your working and running ends again, that top loop again, and cinch down. Creating two overhand knots the same way we did before, except when you pull them together, they're not very symmetrical and pretty. It's the same knot, same usage and durability, but if you want them to look nicer, be a little nicer, and when you have more symmetrical knots, they're a little bit more sturdy, we can create that using almost this same method. So we're going to start off the same way with your working end and your running end and a little bit of rope between your hands. Push your hands together to create that bite. And instead of twisting them both the same way, we're going to twist one end one way and one end the other way. So they're on opposite sides of that bite. And something that helps me when tying it this way is we're going to make our loops smaller and the space between bigger. And we're going to push our hands together again, kind of recreating that bite. And then do your best to kind of hold both those loops in one hand. Don't cross them over. And we're going to do the same thing by grabbing the bottom of the bite. And we're going to come up. And we're going to come through one loop, around and through the other loop. And we're going to grab that. Then grab our working and running ends again and pulling down, not cinching down all the way, because again, we have the top loop and a bottom loop. And we'll do that same thing by taking the top loop and feeding the whole knot through that top loop till it's on the bottom, then grabbing the top, working in running ends, and cinching down. And it gives you 2 overhand knots again, but when you cinch these ones up, they're all neat and symmetrical. Now this way of tying this knot is a lot more sturdy and stable than the first way that we tied, because it's much harder for this bottom loop to feed through the top loop. So it can handle a lot more pulling and weight. But a lot of weight can jam these knots and make it quite hard to untie. But then again, this is still a slipped knot. If we pull these 2 knots apart and keep pulling them apart, this top knot will come undone. Then if we were to take the bottom knot and pull, it will also slip out. The nice thing about both of these loops is that you can create the loop any size you need it to be. So if you need a small loop to hang things up, or a big loop to go around a big post, or even a loop just big enough as a handle for maybe a dog leash, it's nice because you can adjust the size of the loop to what you need. Happy looping! Peace!